Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And we're going to have a wonderful conversation today that applies to everyone. You know, sometimes we talk to people and we're talking specifically to women or business owners or entrepreneurs or whatever. But I tell you what, the subject we're talking about today really is something that most people, many people, probably pretty much everyone will face at some point in their life. And that is being a caregiver for someone. And I'm not really talking about a caregiver for your kids. I'm a caregiver for my husband when he wants dinner, all those things. We're talking about being a caregiver to someone who is ill, long-term or short-term. And so we're going to have a great conversation today with a gentleman who not only is an expert in this, he started an organization to help those people who are caregivers. So please join me in welcoming Todd Keitz to our program today. Welcome, Todd. How are you?
I'm great, Deb. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so looking forward to this conversation.
We're going to have a great time. And you say Todd or TJ. I've been calling you Todd for a while, so we're going to stick with Todd. But for people who know him, he also goes by TJ. So let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will jump into this. Todd Keitz has been a lifelong social good evangelist. He has woven community engagement and social impact into his life since he was a teenager, volunteering in senior living centers. Over decades, he has created intergenerational programs to build bridges within families and communities, volunteered as a hugger for Special Olympics. Oh my gosh, I did that too. That was so much fun. Developed business curriculum for high schools, taught in inner city schools for junior achievement, been a mentor for Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and worked in the healthcare industry, consulting with major employers, hospital systems, pharmaceutical companies, and I lost my place in the bio and other entities. Pardon. Further, he's also proud of the work he did consulting in the 2000s with the South Korean government related to technology companies. In 2023, his most recent endeavor launched, called My Care Friends. It was born out of his experience as a caregiver and advocate for both of his parents who face life-threatening illnesses. My Care Friends, along with 17 Commerce, keeps him very busy. So again, Todd, welcome.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you so much.
And we had a very dramatic pause when I was reading your bio. How funny. I always like to ask my guests how they got to where they are today. And your journey really has been, as you said, one for social good. So talk to us more about, everything that has led up to this point.
Okay, so I'm going to lead in with a little bit of corny humor because that's part of my humor. So if my mom were to ask, how did you get to this point today? I would have said, a plane and a car and so forth. And she would have said, oh, ha, ha.
Ha, ha, ha. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how did I get here? Oh, gosh. It's a journey. We all have a journey.
Mm-hmm.
I most recently had been living out in California and originally from the Philadelphia area. But I lived out in California for a long time. And in 2018, I was watching my mom on video like this, and something wasn't right. So I came for a visit, took her to doctors. One thing led to the next. And 17 hospitalizations in the next 22 months.
Wow.
And that's what landed me here.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, because you needed to go to help take care of her.
Yeah, it was really important. I mean, having the healthcare background that I had, working with the companies that you mentioned, the types of companies, and really having a pretty good knowledge of it, I knew I was the guy, the person
Right.
to be here. Not bashful. I have no problem asking questions, which we'll talk about a lot about that in terms of advocacy for a loved one. And it just one thing led to the next, and I just needed to be here to make sure that everything was okay. And I never got a chance to really to think about it. When you have that many hospitalizations, 22 months, every time you're out, you're back in.
Right. You don't even cut the bracelet off, right?
No, you don't. Exactly. Yeah, we have some artwork with them. Yes. And so it was caring for her. And then she was hospitalized the 17th time, 2 weeks after COVID lockdown.
Okay.
So we weren't allowed in there. We were called in to say goodbye to her. She didn't have COVID. She had a lot of other stuff.
Right.
At the time.
But all the COVID protocols were in effect.
Absolutely. So we were called in, my dad and I were called in to say goodbye, and we had to put on the zoot suit at that point. I mean, everything. And she pulled through. It was pretty incredible. And then 3 months later, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And so then that next year and a half to 2 years, 2 rounds of radiation, 2 rounds of chemo, and it had spread. They told him he had a year left, and miraculously, knock on wood, for the last 20 months, it's been clear. So they're both at a relatively stable point at this point. And my caregiving advocacy has gone from 24/7, which it was for 3 years, to anywhere between 5 and 30 hours a week, depending upon what's going on.
Doctor's appointments and all those various things.
Exactly.
Right. Well, now, so you were in California and they were in Florida, and I know that it has become a permanent relocation. Had you thought it was going to be permanent when you said, I have to go?
No. There was never even a thought about that. I just wanted to come and, you're not thinking, okay, somebody's going to be sick for a long period of time, or things are happening. You just know things aren't right. So you go and you're focused on present. I'm very much, I got to deal with what's happening. I really didn't think about that. As somewhere in the midst of all those hospitalizations, I was just thinking, wow, am I just going to end up being here? And eventually, it happened.
Well, yeah, because then, as you said, your dad got sick, and I think that's obviously one of the biggest challenges as we have older parents is, it's one thing after another. And usually when one gets sick, then eventually the other one does too. If you're fortunate to still have both.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody knows what the journey looks like. I mean, even if you have, personally, you have a diagnosis, you don't know exactly what that journey is going to look like, because everybody's journey is different. So you have the healthcare journey, and then you have the whole caregiver advocacy journey as a part of that. And you really don't know what that's like either. If you've been in those shoes before, you have an understanding. And going in, I definitely had a lot of knowledge from my experience within the healthcare industry. But I'll tell you, till your boots are on the ground, so to speak, and you're in that role, you have no idea what that is like.
Right. Now, you were a business owner, right? And so what happened there?
Yeah. So in 2012, along with my dad and my brother, we co-founded a company called Stock for Good, which was to automate the stock donation process to nonprofit organizations.
I love it.
Yeah. As we know from your introduction, I just like paying things forward, and this spoke to my ethos. And I was the CEO of that company, and raised capital and built a team. We built the software. We patented the software. Fast forward to when my mom was getting sick. I really didn't think, what are we going to do at that point? It was, I got to go take care of my mom.
Right.
And so that's what I did. And that I kept thinking, okay, what do we got to do? What do we got to do? But everything just kept happening. And so 2-3 years runs by, and that was it. We ended up dissolving the company.
Okay. Okay. But that, that brings up obviously a very good discussion point is, we've got, we're off doing this, this caregiving, and the financial situation can be something that gets very tricky very quickly. One of the things that I talk about with people is, if you are the person with cancer, it might be really hard, but frequently we have to continue working. First of all, we have to, because it gives us something to think about, right? We're focusing on the widget, the proposal, the whatever it is that we're doing that day. But we also, need the money. And more importantly, many times we need that insurance. If we're the caregiver, it's also a challenge. And especially when you uproot and move, so is that something that My Care Friends, is part of the, one of the discussions that you guys have, is how people, because you have a lot of groups. And so we'll talk, obviously in depth about My Care Friends, but do you help, people with kind of, how do we do this now from a financial perspective?
Yeah, there's a group within there called finances. So that's a group where members, and membership is free. So people can go in.
Right. I'm a member.
Thank you very much. And yeah, so as a member, you could go and join the finances group and start posting questions. Hey, has anybody ever dealt with this situation? Right. Or this is what I did in this situation. You could also create topics within the forum that you specifically want to moderate, so to speak. And it's a really great place for people to share their experiences. And we're very agnostic in terms of groups. It's not just the cancer group or this or that.
Yeah, it's healthcare.
Exactly. Yeah, healthcare, caregiving, advocacy, healthcare, and then personal interest as well, because what I had heard over and over again when I would go to Cleveland Clinic, which is where I take my parents for everything here in Florida. So I would ask people, they have the caregiver there with the patient, whether it's a loved one or not. And I would ask the caregiver, I'd say, how are you doing? And they would inevitably say, in 99% of the cases, she's doing okay, or he's having a rough time. And I would say, the question was, no, how are you doing? Right. And they're shocked because everybody's always focused on the patient, whether it's a loved one or somebody that we're hired to care for. So yeah, it's this site can go anywhere. People can be anywhere with it. It's on the computer. It's responsive. It's a responsive site where they can see it on their device, on their phone. And yeah, it's just a great resource for people.
Right. Yeah. And I've talked about this with you and with others, that our caregivers are definitely our unsung heroes. At every level, I'm going to include our medical folks in there too. But, for our loved ones and our friends, and even maybe our business associates, people like that who are helping us, in so many cases, we take it for granted. We take them, we as in the patient, we assume that they're going to do everything for us. I mean, I scheduled one of my surgeries one time, then asked my husband, hey, can you, and it wasn't could. I believe it was, you need to take X day off. And he said, well, I can't. And so then, it was like, okay, well, I had somebody else take me. So that really wasn't a big deal. But, and I had my mom do the same thing with me. She called me, and this was several years ago, and she said, now I'm an only. And she said, hey, I'm having gallbladder, I think was what it was. And I need you to come back to Colorado to take me to the hospital and deal with me for the week. I already had plans. I had a vacation planned. Well, the vacation did not happen. Right. And so, we, like I said, we take our caregivers for granted, and let's be honest, we frequently don't tell them thank you. And so that's one of the things that I really strive to do, is to say thanks, even if it's something as simple as, hey, they handed me a Kleenex, but And so I think the caregivers, obviously, as you said, they get left out of this. And so to have a website and an organization like yours to be able to support them, I think is just absolutely critical and fabulous at the same time.
I agree.
Yeah.
I want to say something because you mentioned the caregiver, and there's a program we're going to be doing now. So we have the online site, the community. We also do a lot of
mycarefriends.com.
Exactly, mycarefriends.com, and we also are creating a number of programs that'll be a series of different types of programming on different topics. And we've got 5 very much in the works and another 5 that over the next couple of weeks we'll be getting going in development. One of them happens to be about the ripple effect of caregiving. And so we're going to be looking at that. We're collaborating with somebody pretty cool and awesome. So I can't share yet who. And it's really important. It's just really, really important because it does have a ripple effect. So it's not you have the person who's being cared for, you have the caregiver, but then you have, how does that caregiving ripple effect to the rest of the family and friends? Yeah.
Yeah. When I was so sick, obviously my husband, needed to spend as much time with me as he possibly could. So that affected the people he worked with. They were going to have to take up that slack and do the things that he did. And so, we ended up with, my mom came. And so, I had multiple caregivers. So I was very lucky in that. And so then Tom was able to go to work and do what he needed to do. And there was somebody with me. And if for some reason mom needed to, a break, right? Because caregivers need breaks. Let's be honest about that. Then other people would come. It was one of those things where I was very fortunate that I was almost never alone when I was in the hospital. And so, and the staff loved that too, because they knew there was somebody in there keeping tabs on me. But yeah, there is a ripple effect. And obviously for many people, you have kids that you have that are at home, they can be any age anymore, right? And so, who's going to be taking care of them? Now, obviously it's a big issue when they're young, because you might be, providing assistance for them, driving them, going to their school programs, helping them with homework, feeding them, all of those things. And I think it's one of the biggest challenges that people face is how to be that caregiver. And more importantly, how to take care of themselves. I use this analogy a lot of the airplane oxygen masks. We're told when the oxygen mask drops down, you put yours on first, then you help the person next to you. And I think that is so important because we all, as that caregiver, if we get sick, or even if we just get tired, or cranky, that never happens. But we have to take care of ourselves first, because if we don't, then we cannot take care of someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That phrase is so perfect for what needs to be done. And it's often easier said than done.
Oh, most definitely.
Yes. It took me 2-3 years to really step back because I didn't. When you're thrown into it and you don't have that experience before, there's so many things you're trying to juggle and figure out, talking with doctors, looking at tests. I was basically doing everything and controlling the schedule, et cetera. Finally, when there was a break, I got to breathe and, okay, oh, this feels good. I got to do this again.
Right. Yeah. Well, and, as you were saying, caregivers are thrown into a situation that they, in most cases, do not have the experience to deal with. And then you toss in that there might be various bodily things going on, right? That, oh my God, there are certain things I can deal with. There are certain things I cannot, but that said, if you have to, You do, and I think that's, that was one of the things too, that I was just amazed at my husband at, was the things that he had to help me do that I knew he really did not want to be doing, but it needed done. And, and same thing with taking care of my parents and things like that. When I had to help a nurse do a catheter on my dad, I was absolutely mortified. That was not something that I had ever wanted to do, see, hear, touch. I mean, right. But it needed done. And so you do it. But yeah, I mean, it is such a challenge.
Yeah. And to your point about, we'll say, the icky parts of it.
Mm-hmm.
There's, I don't think anybody goes, oh, me.
Yes, I'll change that bandage. I'll clean up that whatever.
Right. All right. I can remember when I was 8, 9 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and that was my first experience. I mean, I wasn't a caregiver,
Mm-hmm.
but I helped out with my uncle who came to live with us for a
Mm-hmm.
year, who, ended up, he had a colostomy. And so I was sometimes the one who would help go and take it to the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
And
That was a fun task.
yeah. No, I don't want to come play football with you today. I want to do this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, back to your point. Yes, that's a real challenge
Mm-hmm.
for folks, and it's amazing how many millions do it who
Mm-hmm.
who didn't sign up to do it originally. They're
Well,
not
and let's face it, in many cases, it was a true emergency. It was, oh my gosh, I'm doing this. This person was well an hour ago, and now they're not. And or it may have been gradual, things like that. But yeah, things that you really, and you hadn't planned on, you hadn't trained on, right? All these various things. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just, to be that caregiver is, but then to still be doing everything else. I mean, like we said, many of them are working. So how on earth do you try and balance all of this?
Yeah, that's the biggest challenge for anybody who's a
Mm-hmm.
caregiver, to whatever degree you're a caregiver, because it rarely goes as planned.
Mm-hmm.
And when you, so even if in your mind you're thinking, okay, let's just say on the small, and I don't mean small, but the least amount of time end, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who 3 hours a week is helping with mom.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But during those 3 hours, that usually is not just 3 hours, even if it's
Mm-hmm.
3 hours. But then also it ends up where there's a trickle down, and
Mm-hmm.
the trickle down being, maybe you didn't get back to your work on time, and now
Mm-hmm.
you have less time there, or
Mm-hmm.
you couldn't get because you hit rush hour traffic. There's just
Mm-hmm.
so many things. There's one thing which I always say to folks, it's, what's the rhythm? Finding
Mm-hmm.
the rhythm. And it's very hard to find that
Mm-hmm.
rhythm.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a challenge. There's no question about
Well, yeah,
it.
because you can't plan on it. Like we said, I mean, it's like, okay, well, I have to take, my mom to the doctor. Her appointment is at 1. So I'll be there at noon. The appointment lasts a half an hour. I should be done by 2:30. Well, no, the doctor's running late, and oh, we got to go get a prescription. And oh, she really wanted me to take her to the grocery store. Right. And so pretty soon it's 6 o'clock, and, and we're like, that didn't work.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's hard. I mean, I take care of everything in terms of scheduling and so forth. So that's really, if you're a caregiver,
Mm-hmm.
and an advocate, my suggestion is, be the one who does that. Talk to your loved one and say, hey, look, I'm happy to help, but I need to have control of the schedule overall.
Yeah, I need to say that it's Tuesday afternoon that,
right,
exactly. I take you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah, that's that. If at all possible, that's the best way.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that is so important, is the caregiver does need to take control. I mean, as much as possible. And I tell people that as a cancer patient, we are the ones in charge. We need to say, this is what's going on. This is the treatment that I'm picking, all of those various things. But it does have to go hand in hand with, like I said, I told my husband, I'm having surgery this day and you will take me. And he went, no, I won't. And so it is obviously more of a partnership, I think, than anything. And we as the patient forget that, right? Because we're sick, we're whiny, we're whatever it is. And why aren't you wanting to take care of me when I want you to take care of me? And back to that whole gratitude thing. I really need to be grateful for the fact that you can't do Tuesday, but we could do Wednesday, right?
Yeah. And I'm going to dovetail onto that. There's also the other aspect of the person who is the patient. There's a lot of guilt that comes along with that as well. And the guilt you feel for somebody having to take this time to care for them, to do all this. And the biggest challenge is the communication part and communicating with your loved one and both directions, so that we understand how we're each feeling about this and that we understand our roles and where we can step in. Often that's really, it's challenging even for two healthy people.
Right. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's it. Best case scenario, just try to have those conversations and check-ins with each other to see how it's going. It'll be a better experience for both.
Right. And you mentioned guilt. One of the other things is anger. Me as the patient, I'm angry that this happened to me, that my plans, my life have changed, all of these things. But the caregiver is angry also. They're angry for us. They're angry at us. Let's be honest. It's not that we did this on purpose most of the time. But yeah, there's anger. I've been talking with a friend of mine who is going through a situation with her spouse, and she's stuck in the anger mode. And I feel so bad because neither of them are doing what needs to be done because everybody's mad. And anger is part of that grief thing. And I think that's one of the things that we forget is when there is a serious illness, again, long-term or short-term, we do go through those stages of grief, and it's not that it's that we grieve that this happened to us, that our plans changed, all of these various things. And obviously there's different degrees, but anger is a big part of that.
Yeah, it is. Sometimes it's very overt and somebody's angry.
Right.
A lot of times you don't know because they're holding it inside.
Right.
So, and then that gets projected in different ways. So I'm a big proponent of having outside help to work through,
right.
Especially if it becomes a really very chronic situation, you have something which there's just a lot going on. Right. Talk to somebody. I mean, it could be you could be doing it together, which doesn't often happen in this kind of scenario, but you as a caregiver and certainly you as a patient,
right?
It can be helpful as much as people may go, oh, I don't want to talk to anybody. But you know what? Talk to that person. Get it out. Spew it. Just get it out. Because it's better than spewing it back to your loved one.
Right. And, and there's obviously a variety. I mean, you've got your friends, you've got clergy, you've got, and then if you need it, there are support groups. And then obviously, if it's severe enough, mental health counselors, and there's nothing wrong with saying, I need help. And it's really funny because I can say, I need help dealing with the fact that I have cancer, but I don't want to tell anybody that I'm cranky. Right. Or, and so it's perfectly fine, because if we're dealing with mental health issues at whatever degree, it is going to hamper our healing process. And I think that's what many people forget.
Yeah. Well, let's face it. Most people are, as much as people don't want to admit it, many people, everybody's dealing with a mental challenge, going through this dynamic to whatever degree, and so it's there. And your point you made a moment ago, yeah, we have friends and family, different people we can talk to, but often it's it's just more constructive and healthier to talk to somebody outside of that.
Right. Especially
Yeah.
somebody who doesn't know, because, if you're saying, well, I'm feeling very angry at my partner, they might know the partner. They probably do if you're, and so then that kind of biases how they might help you.
Absolutely. Impartial, and an impartial person is always great. Somebody who's just outside of the circle, so to speak.
Right.
And if you talk to the facilities where you're getting your care, often they have recommendations of people, depending upon what you're going through, often it's at no cost. So, yeah, that's important to understand too, because some people also think they may want to go and they go, well, I don't have the finances to be able to do that. Ask. I always say ask. Talk to your facility. Talk and see if there are those kind of services, especially cancer services.
Yeah. And your employer might have an employee assistance program, things like that. And it is a challenge as we've been talking about, illness in the workplace. There's so many things to have to deal with there because, if we're the employee, we don't, whether we're the caregiver or the patient, we might not want anybody to know that there's something going on, because then they might think we can't do our job, which then means we don't have our job. And so, there's those issues, or you might have talked to your HR people or your boss or whoever and said, hey, here's what's going on, but I don't want anybody else to know. So then they get really cranky because, well, all of a sudden Todd's leaving every day at 3. How come Todd's leaving every day at 3? How come I have to do Todd's work? And so it's such a challenge. And as you said, everybody goes through this differently. I've been very open with what I'm going through. People know, but at the same point, do I tell them every single detail? No, they don't need to know the ooks, the icks, the even the whinies. They don't need to know that, but they, there are varying degrees. Like my clients know that every 21 days I have an infusion, and which knocks me down for about 2 days. So they know, okay, Debs might not be able to respond for a couple of days, but she'll be back in, after that. Do they ask for details? Some of them know more, some of them know less. I'm fine if they want to know. I don't care. And to be honest, if somebody said, well, we don't want to work with you, well, then I wouldn't want to be working with them. But it's, when we're having to deal with, especially in the workplace, it is a challenge. How much do you share? How much do you not, hold, how much do you hold back? All of those things really play into this.
Yeah, that's a big topic. That's another program that we're going to be doing, is about employers and caregivers.
Right.
And so it's
because there's federal and state laws that apply also.
Right. And beyond that, how do employers support caregivers? And there's a little bit more that overall that companies are doing, but there's a lot more that they can be doing overall. And it's really important.
And it is a challenge because they want to have empathy. They want to support their employees, but they have a job that needs to be done. And so it's, and like we said, yeah, there are federal and state laws and all sorts of things, but there's also the human aspect of it. I remember years ago, a friend was dealing with her husband had terminal cancer, and the company that she worked for, they allowed employees to give their sick days to her. And I just thought that was such a wonderful thing, and it was probably a bookkeeping nightmare because they were huge. I mean, so trying to figure all that out, but it meant that she still got paid. But then of course the thing was, she was one of these people who everybody loved. What if it's an employee that you're like, we're kind of glad they're not here today, right? So then it's, how do we take care of them in an equitable way?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question and a great example. There's a lot of conversation about this. There's a lot of important points that employers need to consider, both from the work and the human side of it. And it can be a real challenge for sure.
Right. So one of the things that you mentioned that I think is absolutely critical in all of this is the advocacy portion, the asking the questions, all of those various things, which is what you had to do. And me as the patient, I needed to make sure that my husband was going to advocate for me. And so, of course, the first thing was, hopefully before anything happens, right, you let them know, here's what I want. And it can be to the extreme, obviously, of, am I an organ donor? All of those various things. I had said, don't intubate me. And then I woke up and I was intubated. That was not fun, but it was just post-surgery. So it wasn't a big deal, but, that was really made me go, I don't want to I didn't like that. But, your caregivers need to know what your wishes are. And I tell people, if you're getting ready, if you have the opportunity to plan, right, then make sure that you have your living will, your real will, all of those various things in place. But again, who is your advocate? That could be a challenge, if maybe, you mentioned that you have a brother. Well, what if he all of a sudden decided he was going to be in charge? There's so many issues to consider. So we, as that potential patient, have just got to, as you said, communicate and say, here's what I want to happen.
Yeah, so that's a huge topic. Certainly people, and not everybody does this. And look at what your advanced directives are. Get those in place, get your power of attorney in place, get your will, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do you have a DNR? All these are important. And certainly the healthcare surrogate. Who's your healthcare surrogate?
Right.
And make sure that is a legally binding document, not just, oh, okay, you're going to be it.
Right.
When it comes down to it, unless it's in a legal document, that means nothing.
Right. Especially if somebody challenges that.
Oh, absolutely. Over and above that, one thing it's really important to point out is each healthcare facility has their own protocol, their own rules around it. So you could share with them, okay, your power of attorney, your healthcare surrogate. That may not mean anything to them.
Right.
They may have their own document that you have to use. And that's important because a lot of people don't even realize that.
I had no idea that, my medical power of attorney and my wishes were not quite worth the paper they were printed on. And it varied from state to state. It also, could depend on, are you in a hospital that is run by a religious organization? And all these various things. And I think we've seen some of these issues, obviously, because of some of the things that have been going on in the world, coming up with what can be done and what can't. Just because you say, I want or I don't want, they don't have to follow that.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's really important. That's one of the first things. The first thing you're thinking about when something happens isn't, okay, I got to give them my power, so what is the power of attorney? Who's the healthcare surrogate? But you as a caregiver, as an advocate, you have to think about that and know where those documents are. Right. So that you can provide the document and ask the facility, are there any additional documents that you have I need to complete to get that done? It's just so important.
Right. Well, and as that advocate, you also have to be prepared to follow what the patient's wishes are. They might say no DNR, and you're like, keep them alive no matter what. It is a challenge.
It is, and that's about respecting the wishes of the patient. And I've seen those situations where a loved one, a parent, has a DNR, and doctor calls and says, okay, we're not going to do anything. Or do you have a DNR? Yes. Are you going to do we won't do anything. But one of the siblings says, no. So it's really important to follow the wishes.
Well, and to understand what they mean. I had a friend whose father-in-law had ALS, so Lou Gehrig's disease. And he had a very specific protocol and everything. And one of the things he had said was, he did not want intubated because, obviously a lot of times with someone with ALS, you can intubate them and then they can go on for a very long time, but they have to continue to be intubated, which is, like I said, not a fun process. And so, they all knew that. They knew that was what he wanted. He went into the hospital for a ruptured appendix and they intubated him because that did not pertain to the ALS. It was a different diagnosis. And of course, once they intubated him, they couldn't remove it. And she said, I remember the anger in his eyes because that was pretty much the only way he could communicate. The doctors were thinking, save his life. His appendix have ruptured. And so, it was, these situations can get very tricky very quickly.
Very tricky, very quickly, very complex.
Mm-hmm. Right.
No doubt.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
But we, as that patient, absolutely have to have people who are our advocates, who are going to ask those questions, all of those things. One of the things that I advise people when they're dealing with their initial cancer diagnosis is when you go for that initial visit where whichever doctor is telling you, we are going to do, this is what you've got. We're going to do this, this, and this. If at all possible, do not go by yourself. Because I tell people when we go to the doctor and we've got the flu, we go home and we go, when was I supposed to take that medicine? Right. But when we have something as serious as cancer or, some other very critical diagnosis like that, our brain shuts off and the doctor might explain things in great, wonderful detail. And we'll still go home and go, ugh. And so we need that advocate to go with us to ask. Maybe they're going to ask those questions that I'm not brave enough to ask, or, make sure that I understood that they were saying, okay, here's what's going to happen. And so it's very important to have that person who goes with you, ask questions, take notes. Thank God for COVID, being over now, because we can see, look there, I wiggled and I made my camera go. We can have someone who goes in with us to be our advocate.
Yeah. Everything you just said,
Mm-hmm.
you have a situation where you're dealing as a patient, you're dealing with a diagnosis and
Mm-hmm.
it just, you said your mind shuts down. It's right.
Mm-hmm.
You're just thinking about so many other things and
Mm-hmm.
it's hard enough when you are not,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have a diagnosis and
Mm-hmm.
you're sitting there with a clear mind to be able to ask the right questions.
Mm-hmm.
But once that happens, so the person, the advocate, it's really important for the advocate to understand the patient's rights.
Mm-hmm.
And vis-a-vis your rights
Right.
as the caregiver to ask those questions.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something called the Patient's Bill of Rights. It's on the American Hospital Association website, but also each hospital typically has their own,
right.
Slightly similar, but a little different in ways. But it's all about the same thing. You have a right to all the information. It's about you, et cetera. How do you get that, et cetera, et cetera. Because if a doctor says, well, we can't share that with you, hold on a second.
Mm-hmm. Right. And obviously it's not just a doctor, it's all the medical care people.
Oh, yes.
But yeah, it is, and again, everybody has to know everything in advance, communicate well. We as patients and as caregivers also, we tend to think they're the doctor. They know it all. No,
right.
They're wonderful. They save our lives, all of these various things, but they're not mind readers. And I think that's one of the things that we need to keep in mind also.
Yeah. I always say doctors are in it because they care. I mean, it can't be misconstrued. Like a lot of people think, oh, well, they're making $1 gazillion. Well, they really don't anymore. I mean, unless you're top.
Many of them never pay off their loans, right?
Because they care. They want to help people. But I think, I stress this over and over, is that we have to understand they're human. And we also have to understand, in this day and age, they're swamped typically, especially if they're a teaching institution, a clinic. They're being dictated to about their patient load and how much time they can spend with it. And so it's not that they're not caring, it's that they have a boss, they have a job.
Just like they're told you will see 10 patients in an hour.
Absolutely. And they've got a whole things going on. So it's the bringing it back to the advocate. It's the advocate's job to understand that and say, look, I understand you're swamped and you have so much going on. Can you help me understand? Can you help us understand? Because if you can bring them down and get at least a little bit of their anxiety from their job way,
right,
you're co-creating that experience.
Right. Well, and then, ask like, if I send you an email, is that a faster way? Like my endocrinologist, oh my gosh, the man is the most tech friendly doctor I have ever had. When I send him messages, I don't think it's ever more than 30 minutes for him to respond. And sometimes they're very long answers. Now that probably throws his entire day off. And so I've been known to actually put in there, no rush on the response, just had a quick question about this or something like that. But, for some of them that's good. I communicate with my oncologist's office through emailing the nurse in their system, right? And we do that with our primary care doc. So sometimes there are just other ways to communicate rather than actually going in and sitting down and doing an appointment.
Yeah, absolutely. And depending upon the system, often it's not even the doctor who's doing the first read of it.
Right.
It's their nurse or it's one of the other staff that's estimating, okay, they got to prioritize because they have so many
This
patients.
looks fast. Oh, this one's more complicated.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right. Well, we talked about the fact that you have been involved in social impact your entire life. Why? Were your parents like that? Is this something that you were raised to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think back when I was a kid, and some of my earliest, fondest memories were of going with my dad. My dad was early on. I mean, he was probably in his mid to late 20s, and I was a little kid. He was a member of Kiwanis.
Very much a philanthropic organization.
Exactly. Great civic organization. And I used to go with him on Peanut Day. I don't even know if they still have it, but they used to have Peanut Day once a year. And there'd be these little, before the planes had the little packets of peanuts, Kiwanis had these bags of peanuts, and you would go at the corner of an intersection and hand out, and I guess people drop a dime or a quarter in back then.
Or a Krugerrand, as happens every once in a while, right?
So that's where it started, I'm sure. And my parents were both very giving, very generous, philanthropic folks. And then as you had mentioned in the introduction, starting when I was 16, when I first could drive, just going and volunteering at senior assisted living centers and helping, it could be just sitting there listening to them. It could be playing bingo with them. And it often was also helping them record their life stories. So that's where it all started.
I love it. So your parents have thankfully stabilized. And so you decided, well, hey, I don't have anything else to do. I'm going to start My Care Friends. So talk to us more about that.
Yeah. So after the first few years, and then having put the other business to the side and dissolving that, was what's next? I'm not, I'm now in Florida. I now still have caregiving, patient advocacy responsibilities. How do I design life at that point? And so first I wrote the blog, which is right up here, One Day, One Week. And then I had a podcast, which I do once a month, not nearly as much as you do, but I wasn't going to reach the audience and do really what I wanted to do. So I came up with a concept for My Care Friends. It didn't have that name when we first started. And I went to a friend of mine here in Florida, Yolanda, and I just said, hey, I know you develop websites, et cetera, et cetera. Would you be interested in helping? And she said yes. And we started doing it. Then I brought two more old colleague friends in. And so that's kind of where it started. And it's been like every startup, it's had its ups and downs. And now we're just going like this because we have so many great things going on.
I love it. So where do you get your funding? Because you mentioned like somebody like me, I join and it's free for me to join.
Yeah. So the monetization of it is different avenues. It's through, in part through the programming that we are working on now. Now we've only been around for 5 months, not even 5 months launched.
Right.
So we wanted to get the community out there, and then the monetization coming along.
Kind of comes later.
Yeah. So then it'll be the program. So with the programmings, there's monetization strategy with each of those. There is a marketplace that will be going up. It's right there. It's minor. We haven't made a big announcement about it yet because we're still building it out. There'll be a marketplace there. We'll be doing some great collaborations related to that that'll also be monetized. And we have 2 other significant aspects that we have started to work on that'll be launched either toward the end of the year or 2025 that will also be revenue generating.
Okay, cool. I love it. Well, the website again is mycarefriends.com. And, it's, I'm obviously I have the site open and I'm looking at it. So people join. How many people have joined in the 5 months? How many members do you have?
That's a great question. I'm going to say at this point, 170.
Okay. That's a good number. And what I love is, as you mentioned, there's groups and you set them up, or people can suggest, hey, I want to talk about this. And then you go in and you interact with the other people who are there. And I think that is so important. And it's anything and everything. I mean, like the ones that came up right here for me: mindfulness and meditation, travel, self-care, right? We talked about how important cooking and food. So I'm going to have to look at that one. Dementia and Alzheimer's, distance caregiving, right? My mom lives in Kansas. I live in Atlanta. So that's going to be something that I'm going to pay attention to. And that's just the first level. I mean, when I click load more, it loads and it loads and it loads and it loads. I mean, there are so many opportunities. So I love that you are working very actively to reach everyone with what their needs might be. Now, do you monitor the groups, or are they pretty much kind of self-regulated?
Yeah, we look at the groups, we monitor, we have filters built in so that if anybody wants to use a bad word or something, it gets filtered out. There's certain
when you're angry, sometimes you might type those bad words, right?
Yeah. And we have those filters in place, and it's a safe environment. And so, we monitor because we also have to keep track. We interact as needed with different posts that have been made. We're putting up new groups. Like we have the Dr. Raj group for sleep. So it's Sleep by Dr. Raj, who's a great human being. And so people can interact with him. They can go in and pose a question, and they'll ultimately respond. And so it's really, it's cool.
Right. Well, and like we said, I mean, there's so much. So we've got Sleep by Dr. Raj. We've got legal, right? That's a biggie. Holistic healthcare. I'm a firm believer that just because, we have this very established Western medicine, there are also other things that we need to be doing, even if it's just, what's your diet? Are you meditating? I mean, all of those various things. Let's see, we've got caregiving dads, safety, right? That can be a huge issue, especially, in some of the situations that we're dealing with. So, it's what I love is, it's kind of what we alluded to before. Sometimes it is so much easier to talk about situations and difficulties you're having if you don't really know those people. And so, you can put in there, I just don't know what to do. This is what's going on. And, from the marketing perspective, it's really funny. I talk about how important word of mouth is, right? I can see an ad, I can see a commercial, all those things. I pay no attention to it. But when a total stranger on Facebook says, oh my God, this is the greatest restaurant in the world, I'm like, oh, I have to go. And so it is kind of that we like it when it is a person, whether we know them or not, who is providing support and guidance.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of that you can remain anonymous in a way. You can put up just your first name. When you sign up, you don't have to give your real name, but you can get the benefit of having the comfort or the companionship of somebody who's halfway across the country, but maybe dealing with a similar type of situation. Absolutely.
Right. And I haven't looked in detail at, the topics and things like that, or, the actual conversations, but I can just imagine, that they are great sources of inspiration and support and leadership. And sometimes you just need that person. I had somebody who contacted me yesterday, and she said, I'm 35. I have 3 small kids, and I have stage 4 triple positive breast cancer. She said, I understand that's what you have, so that's why I'm reaching out to you.
Wow.
My response to her was to say bad words. And I really am. That's one of the things, I'm not going to, I'm like, and which she responded and laugh. And it really was one of those things where she said, I just need somebody to talk to. And I told her, I said, okay, how do you want to do this? We can do this. I said, we could Zoom. We can just do it here on Facebook. What will help you the most? And I think that's one of the things too, that we as caregivers, we need to ask is the patients, what do you need and how can we give it to you? That's one of the things people ask me the most is my friend, my partner, my child has X, they're asking me cancer. I don't know what to do. And so then what typically happens is they do nothing. And we as the patient think they don't love us, right? So, being able to say, can I bring you dinner on Thursday is fabulous. I might say no. I might say, oh, Friday's better, but I can focus on that. If you if you say, hey, Todd, just let me know if you need something. You're never going to say, I need X, because for one thing, you don't want to impose, you don't want to be a bother, but you also can't think about, hey, I need X. One of the things that I still remember, somebody when I was so sick contacted us and said, do your dogs need to go to the vet? Right? I mean, just something as simple as that, but if they had said, tell us if we can help, we never would have reached out to them, and they mean well, that's the thing, but we just, and so being able to focus that but being able to ask people, hey, I am dealing with a friend, a parent who has ALS. It's brand new to me. What do I need to do? All of those things. And so that's what I love about your site.
Yeah, that's a great point you make in terms of being specific, in terms of not just, hey, let me know if there's anything, because you've got so many things going on, and most of the time they're not going to ask. But I liked your suggestion. Hey, can I bring you dinner on Thursday or Friday or whatever night works for you? You're suggesting, and then they'll go, oh, wow, that'd be really great.
Right. Yeah. Right. Well, oh my gosh, Todd, this has been absolutely fantastic. And a little disclaimer, we're wanting to work together on some projects. And so that's how I know you. But even if that wasn't there, I still think what you are doing is so absolutely critical and so valuable. So tell us again, how do people find you and what are the services and support that you provide?
Sure. Yes. www.mycarefriends.com. It's free to join. Once you join, it's free to connect and join groups. There's the groups on there you can interact in, just like you were just sharing with everybody. There's 70 right now. And then within the groups, there are forums that are current, and there are those you can create yourself.
Okay.
On various topics, whatever you'd like to discuss. There's news feeds on there that are relevant to caregiving and advocacy. So you can go in and check out those articles that are really helpful. For instance, today I did one on HIPAA, and I linked that to that article. There's also online events that are relevant to various groups, and we'll have the marketplace there. And then the offline programming, and I say offline, it'll be online, but it's not part of the community per se. Programming coming up. We're going to be doing women and autoimmune diseases. We'll be doing something on end of life. We'll be doing a whole host of different things. So a lot of different ways people can benefit from My Care Friends.
I love it. And under the About Us, it has the information, obviously, about the entity. And then it has a link to your LinkedIn profile so people can connect with you there.
Yes, absolutely. I'm happy to connect with anybody who has any questions about the site or just about caregiving and patient advocacy in general, or whatever it may be. I'm always happy to connect with people.
I love it. Well, these are those things that you wish you didn't have to talk about, right? But as we said, at some point in time, if not right now, people are going to have to deal with being a caregiver, and so we want people to know that there is a place for you to get support, because we don't want them to be forgotten. We know how important our caregivers are.
Absolutely. Everybody, whether you're a caregiver now, you're either going to need one or be one at some point in your life.
Or both. That's always fun.
Absolutely. Right. It should have been an and or, right?
Right. Well, Todd, this has been fantastic. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Gosh, so if I can narrow it down, as a caregiver advocate who's just knows how difficult that is. Number one, we talked about don't hesitate to ask for help. It's your life too. I had to learn that. It's not easy sometimes, but you have to do that. And importantly, communicate with whoever you're caring for, and communicate with the physicians. Try and co-create an experience with all of them. That's going to benefit everybody. And at a high level, that's probably the best advice I could give.
I love it. Well, I am Deb Creer. I've been having a fascinating and much needed discussion with Todd Keitz of My Care Friends, mycarefriends.com, the ultimate caregiver and advocate community. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.